Business registration data through the Australian Business Register gives us a range of data items, one of which, of course, is the industry data. And as you know, high quality industry data is very important for good quality national economic statistics. Okay. So just some information on the classification. The Australian and New Zealand Standard Industrial Classification is the standard classification used by the Australian Bureau of Statistics and Statistics New Zealand for classifying statistical units by industry for data collection and dissemination. ANZIC, for short, is a core variable that's attached to every unit on the Australian Bureau of Statistics Business Register. It's used for financial, administrative, analytical and statistical purposes. Okay, on the screen is an example of the ANZIC structure that we use at the Australian Bureau of Statistics. It's at the 4-digit level. At the highest level, we have division, then subdivision, group, and then the most detailed level is class. You'll also see an example on the screen of how a business that manufactures alcoholic beer is classified. So at the highest level, it's classified to Division C, which is manufacturing. And at the most detailed level, it's classified to Class 1212, which is beer manufacturing. And that's not unlike some of the other classifications that are operating at the moment. Okay, so how is industry data collected? At the time of business registration, applicants are asked to self-code their intended business activity. So they do it themselves. The information comes through based on what we're told. An ANZIC point of contact coder, or POC, is called upon during the registration process, and that kind of works in the background. And what it does, it assists the business applicant in selecting the most appropriate business description for their intended business activity. I'll explain this a little bit further in the next slide and also provide you with an example. So how does a POC work? A POC is based on an index file with a list of predetermined text responses. Now, associated with each one of those text responses is an ANZIC code. The user provides information through a user interface. In this case, it's a description of their intended business activity. The POC then searches the list of industry description on the index file and returns a list of probable matches using inbuilt logic. These matches are then presented to the user or the applicant in a drop-down list. The applicant then selects the most appropriate description that fits their business and from the drop-down list, and an ANZIC code is allocated to that business registration. So on screen is a screenshot of the Australian Business Register online portal, and we'll focus on the last two fields. The field highlighted here is an open text field. So this is where the applicant will describe their intended business activity, and they can use a number of words to describe that. The next field at the bottom there is just where the drop-down list appears once they've put in that description, and I'll give you an example here. So in this example, this is what's returned to the applicant when they type in the word cleaning. As you can see, there's about 20 odd responses. If we wanted to register a business that cleans windows, for example, that sits somewhere in the middle of that list, then that business will ultimately be allocated an ANZIC code of 7311, which is the class level of building and other industrial cleaning services. And that kind of, as I said earlier, that kind of works in the background. The applicant doesn't see any of that. Okay, so this here now on the screen is the data flow of business registration through to the Australian Bureau of Statistics Statistical Business Register. And this is how it's been operating for quite some time. At the top we have the businesses A, B, C and D, and they register through the Australian Business Register, which is, as I said, separate to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. During the registration process, the Australian Business Register point of contact industry coder is called upon. Once the registration is finalised, then we receive the data at the Australian Bureau of Statistics, and then it goes on to our Statistical Business Register. Now, the great thing about this is that the Australian Bureau of Statistics and the Australian Business Register have a very close working relationship, and we're able to ensure that that point of contact coder is working efficiently and effectively, and it's giving us optimal results. Okay, so the digital transformation agenda. So the Australian government, sorry, my apologies. So recently the Australian government decided to invest just over $250 million on the digital transformation agenda to drive innovation and make it easier for individuals and businesses to access government services. Now, as part of that agenda, the Australian Government has launched a more streamlined business registration service. And it's part of a wider plan by the Australian Government to use an online portal to simplify business registration and licensing services. Okay, so just a bit more information about this. The businesses will be able to fulfil many of their registration obligations in one place, including business licensing and tax registrations. What it means is they won't have to contact individual agencies to get all of that done. They can do everything in one place. The service is simple to use and provides all relevant information at once. You can save and later resume your application if you don't finish it. You can check the availability of a business name, which is not unlike other registration processes, and it includes customer support if that's what you require. Now, recent pilot tests showed that the average time to register a business significantly fell using this online portal from approximately 1 hour to about 15 minutes. And when I say register a business, I don't just mean applying for a business name, I also mean fulfilling other obligations such as applying for licences and other tax registration obligations. And finally, on the digital transformation agenda, it's designed around the life events of a business. So what the new online portal will do is it'll help you register your business, it'll help you run your business, you can modify your business information if that's what you require, and you can also end or cancel your business. Okay. The new online registration service, however, presents considerable risks to the quality of our industry data. Firstly, the Australian Business Register will no longer be the sole provider of business registration services. Third-party providers will also be able to provide business registration services. An example includes accounting software developers. So in Australia, we have a couple of very popular accounting software packages. One's called MYOB and the other one's QuickBooks, and I know they're popular in other countries as well. They will now have the option of offering registration services from within the software. The second problem we have is the existing point of contact coder that's owned by the Australian Business Register will not be available or accessible to these new registration services for some technical reason, or that's embedded within Australian Business Register systems and can't be accessed by anyone else. What it means is that the multiple business registration portals will have their own point of contact coders to service these portals. Each one of those POCs will be owned and maintained independently by business registration providers. And to demonstrate the problem, this is what the potential data flow through to the Australian Bureau of Statistics could now look like. Up the top, we have businesses A, B, C, D and E. They have the option of registering their business through a number of different service providers highlighted in red. Now, each one of those service providers will have their own industry coder. The data will still flow through to the Australian Business Register and then through to us. The problem with this is that each one of those point of contact coders in green will give us different results. So that's where the problem lies. Okay, so what are some of the issues around quality? It's really around, the issues are really centred around the fact that there are multiple POCs in existence, or potentially. Firstly, the accuracy of industry coding. Descriptions may be presented to applicants inconsistently, which may result in errors or bias in the way businesses are coded. So, for example, the previous example I showed you where cleaning was typed in, cleaning windows appeared in the middle of that list. When you've got multiple POCs, cleaning windows may appear higher in another list, lower in another list, or may not appear in another list at all. So that's a concern to us. The second is the maintenance of industry coders. So obviously it's important to keep these point of contact coders up to date and consistent. At the moment, we have the emergence of new industries such as Uber and Bitcoin. And what we want to be able to do is make sure that the point of contact coders and the classification, in fact, are working effectively in dealing with these new emerging industries. When you've got multiple POCs out there, what it might mean is one POC might be updated to account for these new industries, another may not. Or you might have an incorrect interpretation of the classification, so any updates may be incorrect. And, you know, updates can be made at different times as well between the different POCs. So that's a concern. And finally, the use of industry data. So inconsistent approaches to quality, I think, will result in the degradation of the quality of our national economic statistics over time. So what's the solution? Well, we consider the quality of our economic statistics, and I'm sure you agree, to be very, very important. So the Australian Bureau of Statistics has decided to invest in developing its own point of contact coder. The solution we developed is a Windows-based application developed by Statistics Canada called G-Code. It's hosted by the Australian Bureau of Statistics and it's available through an API. So it's available to everyone that wants to use it, and it's just gone into production in May this year. Okay, so all of the data from the online business registration portals will still go through to the Australian Business Register and then through to the Australian Bureau of Statistics. The great thing is now, though, the Australian Business Register has made it compulsory for all new business registration portals to use the Australian Bureau of Statistics industry point of contact coder. Having one solution for all portals ensures consistency in our outputs. And the great thing is the ABS has complete control of the maintenance, including any improvements and changes or updates. Ultimately, we can now ensure that the quality of our data will remain high. So this is now what the future data flow to the Australian Bureau of Statistics will look like from business registration services. We have businesses, again, that want to register. They have the option of registering through a number of different service providers in red. The difference now is that they must use the Australian Bureau of Statistics industry coder, and the data will still flow through the normal channels and onto our business register. The industry data we receive using this model will remain high because the quality will remain high because it will be collected using one of our own tools. So I think we're a lot more comfortable with that now. So as part of the development of this tool, we've also developed a quality assurance strategy for the POC. We believe that the continued success of the ABS industry POC is dependent upon the quality of the industry data that we receive. So ongoing monitoring is critical to ensure that the data quality remains at optimal levels. The strategy we've developed measures the POC performance over time. It determines whether the quality of the industry data is fit for purpose. It tells us whether the POC requires any maintenance, including any remediation. And just recently, as part of the process, we're able to have a closer look at some of these new emerging industries such as Uber and Bitcoin, and we're able to get some insights into the way they're registering and the way they're describing themselves. And that was really interesting. So just to summarise, we were forced to respond to a change in government policy that would impact on our data quality. We created a solution that mitigated those risks to our industry data. The solution can be incorporated into other business applications quite easily. And one of the main advantages is that the ABS has control of both the classification and the tool. So if we wanted to update the classification in consultation with Statistics New Zealand, of course, we could reflect those changes immediately in the tool. We believe that the cost of maintenance is outweighed by the need for quality economic data. I think that's an obvious one. And we're also looking to adopt this new sort of technology with other classifications as well. One example is our occupation classification. So that concludes my presentation. I look forward to any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for some questions. Claude?
Thank you for the interesting presentation. I've just a question concerning what if a business change activity? Do they have to restart the whole process and then register by the central register?
We get other tax activity information as well, and that triggers an update for our business register.
So through the tax register, the code will update it?
Correct.
How do you update it?
Yes.
You update it through the tax register?
Yeah. So a change in the industry classification is a major trigger for us, so we'll update that unit.
Okay, thanks.
Andrew?
Thank you very much, Nick, for a really interesting presentation. I have a question about the service. What you've done now in producing your API and what you described means that you now have a responsibility to provide probably a 24-hour-a-day service for that system.
Yes.
So you have to, your IT infrastructure has to be in place to
Yes.
make it available. Is that fine?
Yes, it is. In fact, there's a formal process and document about the amount of downtime that we allow. That's all in place. It's being dealt with by our IT people. It's more the online portal, the main online portal. Of course, there'll be other ones as well. Is through our Department of Industry. So it's really around their access and their downtime that this new sort of process is centred around. But yeah, I agree. That's something that is being dealt with.
Rico?
Is the classification code only used for statistical use or also used for other kind of policies?
That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure if it's used outside of or beyond the statistical field.
So all the effort is for statistics in this?
Sorry?
All effort is done for update or getting good quality statistics?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Nick.
You're welcome.
Sorry. We have another... Now we will have the last presentation for the first part of the session. It will be done by Monica Förster from Swiss Federal Statistics Office, and it will be on updating and monitoring the NACE code of single establishment enterprise in Swiss Business Register. Maybe some help?
Control-Alt-L. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Hello. As you see, I am working in the... okay, thank you. As you see, I am working in the Statistical Methods Unit, and so my presentation is a little bit methodological. In the following 20 minutes, I will speak to you about the actualization of the NACE code in the Swiss Business Register, but focusing on the single establishment enterprises. First, I will give you an overview of the different steps. This means I will describe in the chapter 2 the frame and herein 3 enterprise types. One of them are the single establishment enterprises where the NACE code is updated by a quarterly samples survey with some constraints, chapter 3. The sampling is handled by random number intervals, which I will explain in chapter 4. The whole process of NACE code control leads to a monitoring data set, chapter 5. Over time, this process had to undergo 2 main adaptations, and I will end with some conclusions. Because I described the main steps already in the slide before, I will mention here only some additional points. The NACE code is an important variable for all units in the Swiss Business Register. Quality should be managed. The first frame of this system, which I will describe, dates from April 2014, the second quarter. So now I will go directly to the details. Each quarter we an extract of the business register is taken, called quarterly frame, the figure down here. It includes all active Swiss enterprises divided by 4 size classes. The very small enterprises with 1 or 2 employees, the small ones with 3 up to 9 employees, the mid-size with 10 up to 99, and the large enterprises with more than 100, with at least 100 employees. The NACE code is actualized according to 3 types of control or update. First, we have the single establishment enterprises with 2 parts. One part in the middle, there the NACE code is updated by other sources. And we have a remainder part where the remainder code is updated by sample surveys. This is the focus where I will speak on. And then the left part is the business register without the single establishment enterprises, a little bit simplified. It contains the multi-establishment enterprises whose NACE code is updated by profiling or providing light. In the following, I focus on the remainder part with the sample survey. But keep in mind these 3 parts of a quarterly frame. But I will focus on the remainder part. There are some constraints to the sample survey. We want a quarterly sample size of about 10,000 enterprises. The actualization cycles has different lengths. Our goal is that the large enterprises should be controlled within 2 years, the mid-size within 3, the small enterprises within 4 years, and the very small enterprises, if possible, within 5 years. And we have dynamic changes in the business register. The enterprises can change structure, size, or type. For example, a single establishment enterprise from the remainder part can go to the multi-establishment part, or vice versa. And the number of active enterprises is not stable over time, slightly increasing. How do we do the sampling? To each enterprise of the quarterly frame belongs a permanent random number, uniformly distributed in the interval 0-1. For each size class, we do the following steps. The interval 0-1 is divided into subintervals whose lengths reflect sampling rates of different quarters, taking into account expected population increases in the business register. Each quarterly sample is defined by enterprises with random numbers contained in the corresponding selection interval. In other words, we have a Poisson sampling scheme with permanent random numbers. The quarterly samples are negatively coordinated, which means they do not overlap. To better understand the idea, suppose we have 0 increase in the business register for the mid-size enterprises. We want to update their NACE code within 3 years. This means in 12 quarters. To achieve this, we will divide the interval 0-1 into 12 subintervals of equal lengths. The mid-size enterprises with random numbers in the first subinterval would be in the first sample. With random numbers in the second subinterval would be in the second sample, and so on. But because the business register is slightly increasing, the 12 subintervals become slightly smaller. They don't have equal lengths. How do we calculate the selection interval for each size class? This is the one slide with a little bit algebra. Let MD be the length of a selection interval for quarter D. The MDs form a geometric sequence. Geometric means that that the ratio of two consecutive members Q is a constant. The geometric series, the sum of the MDs, has the formula M1 times 1 minus Q high K over 1 minus Q. A cycle is controlled in K quarters if the sum of the selection intervals of the MDs exceeds the one for the first time. An obvious definition for M1 would be the fraction desired sample size over the number of the single establishment enterprises in the remainder part, in the right part. But we don't use this M1 directly, but the transformation to be more stable. I won't go in the details here. So here I will show you the starting positions for the geometric series calculation for each size class. We have two assumptions which are based on the means of 5 past quarters. The ratio is needed for the M1 and the rate of increase is needed for the Q. Then we have the first frame with its given numbers, the number of the single establishment enterprises and our final sample size. We see that the very small enterprises are a huge number in comparison to the other sample, to the other size classes. With the chosen sample sizes, small and s, we obtained satisfactory cycle lengths and they sum up to a total sample of 10,000 enterprises. But to be true, the 10,000, if we want to reach the 10,000 and the cycle lengths, we can have all. So we want a sample size, a total sample size of 10,000 and the desired cycle lengths for the large, mid-size and small enterprises. But for the very small, we cannot have our desired cycle lengths. The red numbers here are the numbers which are used in the following figure for the mid-size mid-size enterprises. We see that the selection intervals M1, M2, and so on become smaller. If not, the points would be on the red line. All random numbers in M1 give the mid-size enterprises of the first sample, all in M2 of the second sample, and so on. If the sum of the MDs exceeds the one, we have finished a cycle. Here, between quarter 12 and 13 at the end, we see we go up over the one. The random numbers of this figure will be seen in the next table. This table shows an extract of the random numbers, or more precisely, the random number interval limits. The first line of the second quarter 2014, which was the time of the first quarterly frame, corresponds to the first selection interval. For example, for the mid-size enterprises, the first sample is built with all enterprises with random numbers between 0 and 0.0892. Or the blue numbers show the lower and upper interval limits of the 9th selection interval for the mid-size class. The one in the large class lays in the 6th quarter. This means we will have controlled the large enterprises, or it's their NACE code, of the first frame within 1.5 years. Or for the mid-size, we have, as seen in the figure before, the one in the 13th quarter, in the second quarter of 2017, which means we have respected the cycle length of 3 years. And the one in the small class would be in the second quarter of 2018, which is after 4 years, also respecting the desired sample size. But the one in the for the very small enterprises will be in the fourth quarter 2021. This means after 8.5 years. So we can have all, we have this trade-off. The next slide shows the result for the first frame. The first line before is here given in this table. The number and all for the single establishment enterprises. The number, this table shows the number of enterprises by size class and type of NACE code control. We see, for example, we have in the middle part of this figure at the beginning, the control by other sources, we have more than 300,000 enterprises. And in the right part, the remainder part, we have nearly 200,000 enterprises there where we do the control by sample survey. We can see, for example, that we have 408 large enterprises in this first frame. And we have a total of 10,121 enterprises in this first sample. It cannot be exactly the 10,000 because we have a Poisson sampling. So now I have always spoken about the starting situation and the theorem-based calculations. But we have another main thing. This is the monitoring data set. The first frame is updated quarterly. This leads to the monitoring data set. The monitoring data set reflects always the current situation. It increases every time by about 20,000 enterprises. The monitoring dataset consists of about 25 different variables. There are, for one, the variables, the enterprise identification variables like enterprise identifier, permanent random number, and a status variable which shows when an enterprise, since when an enterprise is continuously in the monitoring data set or when it left it, which means, in other words, when it became inactive. Then we have some structural variables like NACE code, size class, NACE code control type, and if the enterprise is drawn in the sample for the current quarter, and also for the entering quarter and the penultimate quarter. The monitoring dataset gives an overview of the current situation, which I will show in the next slide, and it is also very useful for different controls, which I will show in the slide after next. So here you can see an extract. You can see an extract of the monitoring dataset. For example, a sort of overview. A status variable negative means that the enterprise does not belong to the current frame. For example, the 27,000 enterprises in the fifth line with the negative status means that they are no more active since this quarter. Or the lot, the nearly 630,000 enterprises in in the middle line are in this monitoring dataset since the beginning. Or the last number, 28, will show that we have in the actual quarter, we have this number of enterprises. Maybe they are new, or maybe they had been inactive. And another thing we can do with the monitoring dataset, I will focus on the third application. There is the question, what happened to the 408 large enterprises of the first frame? Are they controlled till now? They should, because the cycle length had been 2 years. We can see that now in the first quarter of 2018, we have of these 408 large enterprises, we have controlled all except 53. These 53, we can see, had never been controlled. But it can be that they changed their structure, they become a multi-establishment enterprise, or they become a smaller one, or they had been inactive, so they left this part where we do the sample survey for the large enterprises. But we have, in principle, what we wanted. We have controlled all which had been in this large remainder part. So this system works since 4 years, since the second quarter in 2014. And in this time, we had two main adaptations. A system change in the business register hugely increased the number of very small enterprises. As consequence, the very small enterprises are neglected from 2015 on if their full-time equivalent is smaller than 0.5. And in 2016, the set of enterprises for which the NACE code update is obtained by other sources, the middle part, has been extended. This didn't change the whole process, only the criteria for being in the middle part of this NACE code control system had to be adapted. So I come to my conclusions. By the presented approach based on permanent random numbers, we have a consistent managing system of the NACE code control for each enterprise. The system can easily be adapted to changes of the population size, for example, the first adaptation before, or in resources. For example, the number of persons who do the control could be reduced. Quarterly sampling can be executed routinely. Structural changes of the enterprises can be noticed. For example, changing from multi-establishment enterprise to single-establishment enterprise. And past and future control of the NACE code is known, can be known because of the random number. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Monica. We have time for some questions. Norbert, yes? Quick questions?
Well, thank you very much for your interesting presentation. If I understood it correctly, then the basic principle is that the NACE code should be controlled via a survey on a sample basis in different periods of time according to the size of the enterprises. This is the main principle behind. My point is, our experience is that there are certain activities where the NACE code is more correct, so to speak, than other ones. So we have certain activity areas where we know the error rate is higher than in other activities. So, for instance, hotels are hotels. They would not change to a barber shop or anything else. But on the other hand, we have this, the professional organizations, the software, and all these new types of services where from the experience is that the error rate in NACE is much higher. The activity where we have everything correct in our test, which we made, was cemeteries. So cemeteries are cemeteries all over the time, and they have not changed.
Yeah.
And if you have visited yesterday the nice Cahiers enterprise, I think they have also been chocolate producers for 200 years. So should we not also focus on those niche areas in specific in your sampling system, where we know that the probability of having a higher error ratio is appropriately higher, not to just take all the NACE activities into the sample. Thank you.
Yeah. So you are right. There are different error rates in different regions. For the moment, we don't respect this, but we could calculate these error rates. But I showed you a system quite basically, and it can be adapted more. But we tried to focus on the large and mid-sized enterprises so that they are controlled within a certain time. And control means that by questionnaire or maybe by telephone, you will know if the NACE code is still the same. Maybe it had been an error and should be corrected, or it changed. This result is not interesting here. It's only which enterprise will be controlled. This will be handled by this system. And if we have another sort of control, we can, of single establishment enterprises, we can put them in this middle part, other sources. For example, when we have controlled the enterprises in the right part, the next quarter it will be in the middle part, because we don't want to control it again. Or enterprises which are newly in the commercial register, which are entering the commercial register, there the NACE code is controlled, so they don't have to be controlled by the sample survey. And so a lot of enterprises, you have seen the numbers, are in the middle part. And if we have more means to have enterprises controlled by other sources, the middle part will grow and the right part will become smaller. But always it is handled by this system of random numbers surveys.
Thank you, Monica. I think we will stop there because we have a coffee break now. And I will thank you again, and thank also the three other presenters for the first part. We will restart the session at 11:10. Thank you very much.